Dodge this.
One world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition of DTRH. It is June 23rd, 2015. This lovely Tuesday edition. I got a few things I want to get into tonight with you all. It's going to be all over the place. I don't know if any of you saw the advertisement I put up for the broadcast tonight. I know a lot of you see it on Twitter and Facebook and the like. I titled it Fukushima Effects at the Confederate Flag, the TPP, the South Carolina shooting, and more. So I will be all over the place tonight, but I'm going to make sense on everything. The reason Fukushima is mixed in there is because of a disturbing report that I saw earlier today, which, by the way, big thanks to Miss Milky. Everybody, if you don't know who she is, go check her out on YouTube. Miss Milky the Clown 1 is her channel. Miss MS Milky MILKY the Clown, and then the number 1. Subscribe to the channel. Check her out. She's on Twitter as well. I'm constantly tweeting her stuff. I go to her and Radchick. They're my two go-to, my first go-to spots. I have others as well, but they're the first two people I go to for information. I go to Miss Milky's channel and I'll contact Christina herself. And you should check out Christina over at Twitter as well. Radchick Forecast. So it's Rad, R-A-D, Chick, the number 4, and then cast, all one word, over at Twitter. And you can find her there. Subscribe to her Twitter channel. Subscribe to Miss Milky and subscribe to them both on YouTube. I promise you, you will not be sorry. And Radchick's been interviewing Dr. Loren Murray, who I'm working on getting on the broadcast soon. I want to pick her brain. Very interesting lady. If you don't know who she is, check her out on YouTube. There's plenty of interviews with her. Anyway, so I want to get into Fukushima and a few other things tonight. First, I want to start off, because the Fukushima stuff I want to focus on for a while, and I'm actually going to play a clip from when Radchick came on with me. When did she come on? It was the 28th of May, I believe. Not May. Listen to me. March. Yes, it was the 28th of March if I remember correctly, when she came on. You can find it over on YouTube. You can find it PopeyeRadio.com. Download the audio. But Christina takes the YouTube videos and she breaks them up into these segments and then puts links to the full interview, but she cuts out like pertinent segments. And one of them was, and I this happens a lot when you're just on point and you're paying attention. Unfortunately, I see something that her and I talked about kind of playing out in reality right now, and I'm going to bring that up later as well. So that's why I'm going to be getting into that. But first, I want to cover the stuff that I really don't think we should even be forced to be arguing about, right? And then the stuff that was covered up and going on while you were arguing over stupid things. And then I want to spend some time on the Fukushima stuff. So I'll be getting into the Fukushima stuff a little bit later, but nonetheless, I will be covering it. The point is I actually want to give it more time than just squeezing in between a few things. So anyway, the Confederate flag, ladies and gentlemen. So is everybody done arguing? But does nobody see the constant meme that's being pushed of 1 versus 2, A versus B, you versus them, me versus you? Do you not see this constant meme that's being pushed out to you, ladies and gentlemen? And while everybody's arguing over whether or not the Confederate flag is actually a racist symbol or not, or whether or not the South Carolina Capitol should remove it from the building, they passed the fast track authority, not just for TPP, but for any treaties for the next 6 years, in the Senate today. So, well done. It's a golf clap for everybody. Well done. While everybody's busy arguing over racism and whatever other bullshit they want you to focus on, they went ahead and just gave away a ton of our rights to mega corporations. Big mega corporations. Multinational corporations, I may add. Well done. But let's all keep pissing in each other's faces and arguing over the Confederate flag, because that really means anything. Let's get all emotional. Let's just appeal to emotion, because that's always worked out well for us. So now the TPP, once Obama signs it, we're screwed. And it's a living document. You've had all these people warning about they could change things, whatever. So just wait. Wait until it starts to affect you and you go, I don't want this. We need to get out now. And they go, oh, well, you can't. You should have, got out when you had the chance to. Then what? Well, we'll just tell them to go F themselves. Okay, but then these multinational corporations can enforce things on their own. And a lot of them have access to the private mercenary companies. You don't think that it would get to that level? No, Popeye, it'll never get to that level. Oh, I'm sure 10 years ago you didn't think it would get to the level we're at now. But let's all get pissed off about the Confederate flag and what it means. And whether you should fly it or whether you shouldn't fly it. And whether that fueled this shooting. The Confederate flag, let's be clear. The Confederate flag didn't fuel the shooting. The guy was a psycho. If it wasn't the Confederate flag, he would have wrapped himself in something else. He had the Rhodesian flag on him, too. The guy was a psycho. They're just symbols. Symbols mean nothing unless you give them power. You're doing what this guy wanted you to do to a certain extent. Who I have to give credit to are the families of the people that were killed. One of them was crying her eyes out, but she said, I forgive you. See, that's what this country needs. And I'm going to get into why I don't think that whole thing's a false flag operation too. But this argument over a Confederate flag, great. So while everybody took their eye off the ball, TPP just went through. And again, we're arguing over what? Oh, over what? Or I should say fast track went through, not TPP, but don't worry, TPP is going to get fast tracked, so it doesn't matter. Essentially, TPP went through. Anyway, for what? Oh, that flag, it represents racism against black people. No, it actually doesn't. It was a flag, yes. There are racist a-holes that fly the Confederate flag, but the Confederate flag was not a racist symbol. Just like the dreaded N-word wasn't a racial epithet until they started using it the way they did. It didn't achieve those the negative connotations that it soaked up like a sponge until it was used in the wrong way. The dreaded N-word, and I've done shows on this before where I actually said it on air and I broke it down multiple times. I actually tweeted him out the other day. Just go type in racism in the Federal Jack search bar and it'll bring up the shows. But that word actually means ignorant individual. That's the true definition of that word. Now it's being changed in the dictionaries. If you go to like the Webster's Online Dictionary, it's changed. And I did a whole thing about this. And it just goes to show that it's being changed to fit what society thinks the word means rather than what the actual definition of the word means, which is really dangerous and has many negative implications that can follow such acts like that. But the point is, the word actually means ignorant individual. It was just that it was empowered because of the hatred that was put into using it. Okay, it was the energy that those individuals, the intent that they put into it. Again, intent. It wasn't really the word, just like it isn't a hammer that kills somebody or builds a house. It's the hammer is just a tool. It could be used to do both, but you need to put the proper intent into doing it. Same thing with the word. Same thing with the flag. It was just certain racist a-holes flew it. But if you're going to say that the Confederate, you want a fair flag debate. If the Confederate flag needs to come down, well, then the American flag, our American flag, which actually isn't the real, well, there's the civil flag, and then there's the Admiralty flag, which is what we fly now during a time of war, and a few other things. Anyway, the Admiralty flag, that could be considered, quote-unquote, racist. It could be considered a symbol of oppression and hatred and tyranny. Many countries would say, yeah. Why don't you ask Iraqis what they think of the American flag? And I'm not talking about the ones being interviewed by CNN. Why don't you ask average Joe Iraqi? Or any of the other countries that we've invaded or we want to bomb and that we demonize? Why don't we ask them if they think our flag is racist or a symbol of oppression? It's just a frigging symbol. It's just a symbol, ladies and gentlemen. And while everybody's focused on a symbol, the Fast Track Authority went through. So, there you have that. Now, speaking of the Civil War, again, is thrown up in people's faces. Well, the Civil War, because the whole concept that the Confederate flag is a racist symbol, you'd have to believe that the South was fighting just to keep black people as slaves, and it was much deeper than that. States' rights was a huge issue. Slavery was more of a red herring. It would have ended regardless of whether the North, went in and freed the slaves, It would have happened regardless. Technology would have ended slavery. It already was to a degree. Because eventually technology would adapt that it would be faster than, it doesn't matter if you have 100 slaves out in the field doing work. The technology would adapt that it would still be more efficient than 100 of them. And it's less mouths to feed, less things to deal with. You'd go buy the piece of equipment. That's how it works, ladies and gentlemen. So slavery would have ended. It would have become inefficient and irrelevant on its own, and it was heading there. And newsflash, slavery didn't start here in the United States. A lot of these young kids out there, these ignorant, college-age kids, they think that because they were told that slavery started here in the United States. Slavery goes back all the way to ancient Sumer and Babylon, just so we're clear. I mean, 5,000-6,000 years ago. Pretty sure the United States is only a couple hundred years old, last time I checked. How about the Dutch East India Company or the British East India Company? So know what you're talking about. America didn't invent slavery. When I hear people say that ignorant statement, I want to smack them clear across the mouth. Not because you're offending my country, because it's the most ignorant thing I think I've ever heard in my life. We didn't invent slavery. That goes back thousands of years. But slavery here in the United States during the Civil War period was coming to an end on its own, and it would have weeded itself out. It would have been inefficient. And society was changing the way it looked at things as well. So it was inevitable. So the whole concept of the Civil War was fought to free the slaves is bullshit. It's a red herring. Abraham Lincoln is quoted as saying that if he didn't have to free the slaves to win the Civil War, he wouldn't have done so. The North had slaves. Nobody was perfect in this. But see, we can't even be honest about what happened, and that's why today you have all this misunderstanding, and it's easy to emotionally manipulate people. Because no one even has a basic concept of what actually happened during the Civil War. It was the French and the British, by the way, that were really fomenting it. They wanted to see, remember I've said this before, I said this the other day, and I've said this 1,000 times. The only way to get this country to fall is to have it take itself out. What do you think the Civil War was about? It was the country versus itself. Brother versus brother. Father versus son. The country tearing itself apart. And the French and the British were just waiting for it to happen, and they were helping. The British had plans to attack Boston and hit major cities in the north from the sea to help the South out, which would have greatly helped them out. You know who came in and helped us? I bet you nobody knows this. I know some people do, but I'm willing to bet most people actually don't know this. The Russians. The Russians came in. You know that? There was a fleet in New York Harbor and a fleet in San Francisco. They kept the French and the British away from causing any trouble with their fleets. The Russians. Kind of makes you wonder why the powers that shouldn't be eventually went after Russia and had the Tsar and their family, and everybody killed. Just makes you wonder. Alternative history, ladies and gentlemen. But it is the truth. You can go look it up. Tarpley, good buddy Webster Tarpley, he wrote an article about this years ago, back in like 2011. I'm going to drop it in the chat room right now. But you can just look it up. Just type in, if you look up on any search engine you want, just look up U.S. Civil War, the U.S.-Russian alliance that saved the Union. And I'm going to drop the link. There you go. That was my finger slamming the enter button on my keyboard. I just put it into the chat room, ladies and gentlemen, for all you chatters. So what you think you know, and the reason I bring all this up is because what you think you know about the Civil War, you don't. It's what you're fed, just like everything else. It's to play off your emotions. Now, I'm not condoning what people were doing, by the way, with slavery back in the day. That's horrific. The act of slavery is horrible. But we have more slaves today than we did back then. I hope you realize that. You people realize that, right? We're all slaves now. You want to get technical? We're all slaves. How many of you can not go to work and not pay your credit card bills or your mortgage payment or your car payment and still have your house or the electricity on or your car to get back and forth to work or to the store? So you're a slave to your mortgage. You're a slave to your car loan. You're a slave to your credit card debt. Oh, and who owns all of that debt? Oh. Banks. And aren't banks part of the problem? And I know this is kind of simplifying things, and it's a little bit deeper than that, but you get my point, right? You see? So we're still all slaves. It's just we don't think we're slaves anymore. We think we're free. It's this illusion of freedom. So instead of arguing over what the Confederate flag means and if we should fly it in the South Carolina Capitol after what this racist jerk-off did, instead of arguing about that, ladies and gentlemen, perhaps, maybe we can focus on the real problem. The TPP, You don't think that's going to be slavery in a sense? You don't think that's going to bring about that? How about all the jobs that are going to get lost over here in the United States and other countries? How about you're going to be a slave to a corporation? You don't have the right to know what's in your food. You peon. You accept this food. Oh, and your government stands in the way? Well, we'll sue them and we'll take your money. And it'll literally make our governments beholden to them, almost like slaves to the corporations. Not that they're not already. Fascism 2.0. But no, let's argue over an effing Confederate flag. You see how they manipulate us via emotion, ladies and gentlemen? Maybe you'd have a better understanding. The reason I brought all that stuff up about the Civil War, and I want you to read Tarpley's article. He actually did an interview on, and I normally don't do this, but Tarpley did an interview on Jeff Rentz's show like a year and a half ago about it. You should go listen to it. Just go on YouTube and type in Webster Tarpley on Russia in Civil War, and that should bring up it'll probably bring it up, or just type in Russia saved U.S. during Civil War. That should definitely bring it up. Educate yourself. Know a little bit more so you won't get sucked into this crap and be all emotional. There's that rant. Now, as for the shooting, we got about 5 minutes for a break, so I have time to get into this. I don't think it's a false flag operation, and I know I have a lot of friends out there that disagree with me on this, but I don't think it's a false flag operation. And I know it happened at a very quote-unquote convenient time. But sometimes that stuff does happen. I know that's going to sound contrary to the things I say, but there's no indicators to me at all, after taking days to look at this, that it's a false flag operation. The indicators that I do see are just what I thought that night when I talked about it, that they're going to take this and they're going to use it to twist it, and they're going to twist the narrative however they want. They're going to attempt to spin it. Notice, remember I always say it's the reaction that you can tell. You notice they haven't come out and said magazine capacity. They haven't come out and said anything. They haven't talked about. They've just said strict. We need better gun laws. Very blatant, blanket, emotional statement, trying to rile people up and saying that common sense gun laws like universal background checks would have stopped this. But how? According to the official story, he was given the gun by his parents. So if that's actually how he got the gun, then background checks wouldn't have stopped it, right? So then you'd have to make like giving certain things as gifts illegal. Now that's a slippery slope. You open the door to, now once they tell you what you can give as a gift, now they're like, well, you can't give computers as gifts. You can't give books as gifts. I mean, it could go there. You see how things can open the door, and that's how they do it. Just saying, that's how they do it. So anyway, the reason I say I don't think it's a false flag is their talking points. For one, I mean, you don't hear them saying high capacity magazines or anything. It was done with, if it was going to be an operation done by them, the kid would have had multiple magazines on them. And I don't mean a couple just regular size mags. He would have had like the 33 round mags that Glock makes, and he would have had, or a drum magazine. He probably wouldn't, he used the Glock. He probably wouldn't have even used the Glock. He would have used something like an AR-15 or something to demonize it. It wouldn't have been like it is. I mean, how come all these other shootings you hear them mention magazine capacity, and this one they don't say it? Oh, you know why? Because according to the official story, the kid reloaded 5 times in the church. Their whole argument for magazine capacity is destroyed because they say if you diminish the amount of bullets that can be carried by the perpetrator, he'll have to reload more and somebody will be able to tackle him. Well, according to the official story, this guy reloaded 5 times and nobody tackled him. So your theory about having less bullets in the magazine goes out the effing window, anti-gun crowd. So I don't see that being pushed. There's a lot of stuff I don't see being pushed. So I think it's real. I do think, as I said, that they'll take advantage of it. Like Rahm Emanuel said, never let a good crisis go to waste. So they will take advantage of it. But it's hard for them. You can see it's very hard for them to even try to push certain agendas because they can't use talking points. Because this is actually a real event. You can see by the way they've reacted to it that it's a real event. And who I actually have to give credit to, again, are the families of the victims. Because they're the people, and the people of that city that are doing things in prayer and in peace, they're showing us a different way. They're trying to not give this dirtbag what he wanted. And you also have to blame the media, because them and the government have been pushing this race crap for so long and stoking that energy that I called it months ago and said there are going to be people that are very real and that are going to snap. And then they'll use those, different events to push for different regulations. And they'll say, you see, which is what they're doing now. And in this kid's manifesto, supposedly, if it's his manifesto on this website, it says that he first got embroiled in this because he kept seeing George Zimmerman's name mentioned over the Trayvon Martin case, and he kept seeing how racism was being pushed. And then he Googled black on white crime. And then he was looking at the different stories, and he got enraged, which I saw happening and we talked about with different people even on this show. It's a game of chess, ladies and gentlemen. You see what they're doing? The media and the powers that shouldn't be are good. They know what they're doing. They're pros. Anyway, we're going to break. We'll be back in a few short minutes. Do not go anywhere. I have a ton of other things I want to get into. Quick little lesson on the Confederate flag and the Civil War. Stay tuned. All right, we are back. So I want to get back into the reasons I don't think the South Carolina shooting was a false flag event. And again, I'm not bashing anybody that says it is. I understand why people would think it is. I mean, I really do. My analysis of it, though, is that it's not. I do think that they will use it to push an agenda. And the reason I want to keep talking about this for a few minutes is because I had said something last segment that I want to focus on again. I said that if anyone is to blame, in my eyes, to a large part, is the media and the powers that shouldn't be. For all the race baiting and all of the tension that they created in the past 6 to 10 months, even a year in this country. Al Sharpton, he's part of the quote-unquote media, if that's what you want to call it. Mockingbird media. He's an agent provocateur, but anyway, I digress. Sharpton. Look up Tawana Brawley, ladies and gentlemen. Look up that whole debacle and tell me if you think the guy should have any credibility after being caught lying. And although he said he didn't lie, he didn't know. Good due diligence. Anyway, liar. So, why I don't believe it's a false flag operation. I blame the media to a large part because they created this dynamic. They created this paradigm. They put out that energy. So did the powers that shouldn't be. They stoked this. And they know that there's going to be some real moron that will go out and do something dumb. They're not stupid. They know. They've studied human psychology, ladies and gentlemen. They understand us. So it just irritates me when I hear people pretty much lying through their teeth about this. On any end, whether it's pushing an agenda on the right or the left. I don't like that they're using this thing to push politics at all. I think they should leave these people alone. Everybody. Leave them alone. Let them mourn in peace. Look how the families and the people in that city have handled themselves. We ought to take a page out of their notebook. I know people think that that's one of the reasons it's fake, but I'm sorry, but I've seen some of them crying their eyes out while they're still forgiving this person. Do you know how much strength that takes? And you know what? I don't want to hear the argument, well, I couldn't do that, So therefore, there's no way that anybody else could do that. Well, you know what? You're not them. And by automatically assuming that it's a false flag operation because you think that these people are crisis actors or fake, because you wouldn't be able to emotionally handle it, or you think that you would be in a different emotional state, you're not them. Have you ever been in that situation? No. You know what the first thing I learned when Merce died was, do not judge how other people mourn individually. Don't judge how they do it. And don't judge the mourning process in and of itself and think that it needs to be a specific certain way. And if it's not, it's being done improperly or disrespectfully. Now, maybe some of you don't have the perspective I have on that. I understand that. But I have to tell you, as someone who's dealt with loss on a very profound level in his own life, I have to challenge you and call you out and say, look, unless you yourself have dealt with loss, you won't understand how those people are doing it like that. They're probably mourning in quiet. Did you guys ever hear me come on air and cry like a baby? I teared up a little bit and I got a little shaky voiced a few times when talking about Merce when I first came back on air. But did I ever come on air and just blubber my eyes out for 10 or 15 minutes? No. Did it happen? Yes. I cried a lot when she died. So to sit and say that because they publicly forgave the person, even though some of them were bawling their eyes out, that it's a false flag event because you or no human could possibly ever do that, well, you're wrong. And perhaps I would have thought the same way. Maybe not, because I looked deeper into things, but and I'm not picking on anybody. I just happen to look deeper into things than most people. They, even the regular researchers and stuff. But honestly, if I hadn't gone through the experience that I went through, I probably wouldn't have the perspective on it that I do, realistically. So I'm not chastising anybody. Don't take it like that if you're in the alternative media or you're a friend of mine and you hear me say this and you're like, why is Popeye being a dick? I'm not. I'm trying to offer you perspective from somebody who lost his wife. Somebody who lost someone who was very close to him, as these people did. And you can't understand how they're mourning the way they are. Well, I'm offering you a window into that understanding. So don't take it like I'm trying to be a jerk. I'm trying to open up and help you understand how people deal with loss on a profound scale if you haven't dealt with it. Because if you have dealt with it, you would think before you would jump out and speak like that. And maybe if you have, and you did jump out and speak, because I don't know, I'm sure, I can't read everybody's minds. I'm sure we all deal with profound loss. That's part of this human experience. So if you have dealt with it, but you still jump to that conclusion, before you continue, go back and think about it from that level of you mourning. And if you feel that you couldn't, just remember the first rule of mourning, right? It's like the first rule of Fight Club. This is how I try to keep myself in perspective. Popeye's first rule of mourning is don't judge how other people mourn. Because and there's no standard textbook way to do it. And a lot of times people will surprise you. And I have to give those families a lot of credit that they did that. That takes courage. That takes strength to stand up and do that. And say, oh, I forgive you. And they needed to do that. They understood that although they were going through some horrific stuff, all the country's eyes were upon them, and their reactions to it held a lot of power and a lot of weight. And those people chose love, ladies and gentlemen, rather than fear, which is where the anger would come from. Rather than the fear frequency and anger and vengeance, those people, not every single one of them, But a lot of the family members have chosen love and forgiveness. As hard as that is. And there's going to be days where they don't feel like that. There's going to be days where they're very angry about it. And they're going to want to beat this kid's head in, probably. And I wouldn't blame them for that, but that's profoundly powerful that they could live in that frequency and still find the strength to put that out. So I don't think that they're crisis actors or they're acting. And I'm not bashing anybody that does think that. I totally understand why you would. I mean, the timing and certain things about it do kind of look shady. But when you look into it, and if, like I said, when it comes to victims' families, the reactions of certain, okay, if you're going to look at like the Sandy Hook thing, yeah, that's still shady. That guy, the way he was laughing and everything, okay, that's really weird. Okay. And I'm looking at it through my no judging lenses, and I still think that whole thing was weird. Okay. But in this case, I don't think the way the families reacted was weird. I think it actually was very powerful what they had to do. I think but by putting out that love, by showing the world that they could do that, they could face adversity. I think that they are going to help people that they don't even know. As Christina would say, the ripple effect. And she's correct. It's like throwing a stone in a pond, as I always say. It doesn't matter if that stone is the tiniest little stone. It's going to create a ripple that will be felt all the way across that pond, ladies and gentlemen. So, I wanted to cover that really quick and give you that perspective. Just one more reason I don't think it's a false flag event, but I do think that this kid was fueled by the mainstream media, largely in part by the hate that they were pushing, the race baiting that CNN constantly pushes, MSNBC, Al Sharpton, Fox, all of them, because they all have a role to play. And other people, even certain people in the alternative media, playing into it, whether they know it or not. This kid was obviously a disturbed individual. Am I ruling out any of the mental health drugs he was on? No, I'm not. But you can't also immediately go to that too. That's like the opposite reaction of take the guns away. The opposite reaction is, oh my God, he must have been on SSRI drugs. Again, it's his fault because he took this or he took that. Well, you better be careful what you people that keep labeling everything as it's got to be a mental health issue. You better be careful what you keep asking for. You're walking right into a trap and you don't even realize it. Keep it up. Pretty soon you're going to need a mental health check just to be able to take a piss in the middle of the night. It's all reacting on emotion. You know, the one side comes in and says, we need more gun control. The people that have their guns, and I'm a gun owner, and I'm a firm believer and, practicer, I don't think that's a proper word, listen to me, a practicing believer in the Second Amendment, I should say. But a practitioner, I think is the word, actually, now that I think about it. Anyway, I believe in gun rights, but the opposite emotional reaction of take the guns away is, oh my God, the guy must have been on mental health drugs. We should look into that. Don't look at the guns. And I'm not blaming guns or attacking guns. But now you're just deflecting their anger towards something else, which then they're eventually going to use that avenue because they want to anyway. You'll have to get a mental health check just to go rent a freaking movie or go to the movies or get into the mall or, like I said, get up to take a leak in the middle of the night. You better watch what you wish for. Stop reacting on emotion. Everybody take a step back. Everybody's so knee-deep in this. It's as soon as something happens, it's just instant reactions from all sides. Boom, 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 boom. Everybody take a step back and calm yourself. Stop pushing political agendas before the bodies are even cold. That's abhorrent on any angle. I don't care if you're pro-gun or not. It's abhorrent and it's disgusting. How about a little love and some logic for once, instead of emotional reaction? we're literally, this country, not all of us, but a large portion of us, are acting like Pavlov's dogs. As soon as they ring the emotional bell, we drool. People, use your heads. They're manipulating your minds for a reason because you have such powerful brains. They're helping create this reality to a certain extent. It's the truth. You'd be surprised the power of your own brain, ladies and gentlemen. You really would be. Okay? Your brain is an amazing thing. Your mind. That's pretty much what this is. A battle for your mind. They put ideas and they program you to believe certain things because they know how you are. They understand that your brain is a biological computer and how powerful it is, ladies and gentlemen. That's why they do what they do, okay? It's disgusting to see humanity being manipulated the way it is. I'm going to play a clip for you. It's called The Power of Your Mind. The amazing power of your mind. Because I want to fit this in here. Last 11 and a half minutes before we go to break. Just take a listen to this. You'll see why they would manipulate you. Remember, your true power, ladies and gentlemen. And they need to manipulate it to control you. Here we go.
Hey everyone, Jeremy Bennett here. Let's look at how powerful your mind is. Let's compare your mind to the most sophisticated man-made device ever created, the computer. The average computer can hold about 250,000 pictures, 20,000 songs, and hundreds of full-length videos. Nowadays on something the size of my finger. Crazy. But let's compare it to your mind. Your mind can perform an estimated 10 quadrillion operations per second without you even knowing it. Wild. Ask yourself right now, what's making your blood flow throughout your veins with the perfect amount of pressure to keep you alive? What's making your heart beat right now? Are you consciously commanding your heart to beat right now? No. What's maintaining your body core temperature to the perfect degree to keep you alive? What's doing the 6 trillion things to your 60 trillion cells every single second? It's something called your subconscious mind. This is the powerhouse to who you are. Your cat has it, even your puppy has it. But of all the things that your subconscious mind can do, it can't do one thing. And this thing can help you attract good things into your life or can absolutely demolish your health. What is that one thing it can't do? It can't distinguish between a real event and something you merely think about. Sounds absolutely ridiculous, right? What happens when you have a nightmare? You wake up, your heart is pounding, you're sweating, and you're anxious beyond words. The nightmare existed in your mind. You weren't in any real danger at all. But your mind didn't know that. You physiologically reacted as if the nightmare was actually taking place in reality. There was a study conducted where a doctor hooked up an elite athlete, a professional skier, to a device that measured the athlete's muscle fibers. He told the skier to merely think about skiing down a hill without moving a muscle. The act of thinking about skiing down the hill actually made the same muscle fibers that would have actually fired off if he were to be actually skiing fire off from thoughts. This has been demonstrated time after time with the placebo effect. Group A suffering from a particular illness gets prescribed a pharmaceutical FDA-approved drug specifically designed to treat that illness. Group B suffering from the same illness gets a sugar pill, thinking it's real medication. Both groups get cured. In fact, the New England Journal of Medicine published a study involving two groups suffering from the same degenerative knee disorder. Group A had a surgery designed to scope out the knee and relieve the symptoms of the disorder. Group B, with the permission of the family, had a fake surgery, a placebo surgery, thinking that they had a real surgery. Only 3 small incisions were made in the kneecap, but no real surgery was performed. Both groups reported that the surgery was a success. In fact, researchers are suggesting that a minimum of 1/3 of all medical treatment, including surgery, is due to the belief that the treatment is going to work, the placebo effect. Most people don't realize that there is also something called the nocebo effect. It's practically the opposite of the placebo effect. The mind, instead of curing illness, contributes to illness. That's what a hypochondriac is. Their belief that they're going to develop a disease actually causes them to experience the symptoms of it. Whatever belief you hold in your subconscious mind will become your reality. Bottom line. That's how hypnosis works. The hypnotist implants the idea in the back of their subject's mind, and the subject experiences whatever they hold there. If they hold the belief that there's a spider on their arm, their eyes actually see a spider on their arm. An amazing demonstration occurs when the hypnotist walks towards his subject with his finger extended. He tells the subject that his finger is hot and burning. The hypnotist slowly touches the subject on their arm, and a blister actually forms in the exact place that the finger touched. Now, this is crucial to understand in all healing. Free will, as we understand it, is practically an illusion. In fact, 2 to 4% of the time, you decide what you want to do. You actually make the decision. 96 to 98% of the time, you don't. You're on autopilot. Your subconscious mind controls your decisions 96 to 98% of the time. Don't believe me? Do you like ice cream? If you do, snap your fingers and stop liking it. Do you enjoy watching sports? Snap your fingers and stop enjoying it. You can't. 96 to 98% of the time, everything we crave, desire, and act upon comes from what we hold predominantly in the back of our subconscious minds. Whatever we hold predominantly in the back of our subconscious minds, we are attracted to in life. What happens when you buy a new car? It's the only car you see on the road for the next 2.5 weeks. You saw those cars before you bought your car, but why didn't they stand out to you? Because you didn't own that car yourself. You weren't thinking about it yourself. What you hold in your mind, you're attracted to in life. That's how subliminal ads work so effectively. They work so effectively that they are banned in over 10 countries as a way to advertise. So if what you hold in the back of your subconscious mind shapes your reality, what shapes your subconscious mind? Practically everything that you're exposed to, everything that you see, hear, smell, taste, and feel is shaping your subconscious mind. Let's look at some specifics. Television. Here's a scary stat. By the time a child finishes elementary school, that child has witnessed an estimated 8,000 simulated murders on TV. All of these extremely graphic scenes are sinking back into their minds. And don't be tricked by Hollywood or cartoons. In the most important developmental years, when a child should be taught compassion and understanding, extremely intelligent minds behind the creation of perceived harmless children's cartoons are sinking violence into the back of their minds. Don't be fooled. What are you listening to on the radio? Every single word or thought you hold in your mind has a particular vibrational frequency. Negative words or intentions have slower vibrational frequencies, and positive words have higher vibrational frequencies. This is a song by Lady Gaga called Bad Romance. Some of the lyrics are, I want your drama, I want your ugly, I want your disease, I want a bad, bad romance. Our thoughts create us. We have to be extremely careful with what we are feeding our minds. Music can be beautiful and beneficial, but it can also have a negative impact on your health. Choose wisely. When I was growing up, the most violence we had on video games was Mario and Luigi jumping over turtles' heads. This is what our youth are playing today. These gruesome, extremely graphic images are sinking into the backs of their subconscious minds, weakening their immune systems and having astronomical, gradual negative effects on their health. Nobody's saying that these games are going to cause them to pick up a gun and go shoot somebody, but these games are affecting their health. There is zero doubt about that. What happens when you gossip? In order for you to gossip, you have to hold a negative memory and negative thought inside of your mind. You not only think about that negative memory, you share it with the other person that you're talking to. The second you hold negative thoughts in your mind, the biochemistry of your brain changes and you release cortisol, the stress hormone, into your blood, which then weakens your immune system, inhibits the actions of your white blood cells, increases the chances of infection, and even promotes weight gain. All from gossiping, all from your thinking. You can't gossip without hurting yourself. Remember that. But of everything you can expose yourself to, there is nothing more important than the thoughts you hold in your mind. We have on average 60,000 thoughts a day. And the reality is, not only are most of these thoughts the same thoughts we had yesterday, but they are negative thoughts, either dwelling on something bad in the past or fearing something that could potentially happen in the future. The second we have these negative thoughts, the second we release cortisol, the stress hormone, into our blood. Our thoughts create us. Most people believe that situations cause them anxiety, stress, or cause them to be depressed. The reality is this: there is absolutely no situation in the entire universe that can cause someone to experience anxiety. None. It's your psychological reaction to the situation that can cause you to experience anxiety, not the situation itself. This is crucial to understand. Why is it that when one person skydives, their brain releases endorphins, the good feeling chemical, into their blood, while releasing cortisol into another's? It's the same situation. How can the company of one person cause excitement in one person while making another person stressed? It's because it's never the situation that causes anyone to experience anxiety, but their reaction to it. You create your anxiety, not a situation. When you truly fundamentally understand this truth, that's when you realize that you control your anxiety, not a situation. It's one of the most liberating feelings you can ever experience. If you create it, you can take it away. Your thoughts control your life. You are the creator of your everything. Choose your thoughts wisely. God bless.
Very powerful words, ladies and gentlemen. And the reason I chose the end of that rant to point it out is because, positive or negative, your thoughts create your reality. That kid had his reality shaped for him by plugging in to that fear frequency and feeding on hate and not love. You can also take a personal lesson in your own true power from that clip. We'll be back in hour number 2. We're getting into Fukushima. Stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye, from FederalJack.com, PopeyeRadio.com, and of course, my YouTube archives, DTRH Radio Archives over on YouTube, DTRH Radio Archives. That's Delta Tango Romeo Hotel Radio Archives. Go check it out. We're back with hour number 2. I want to get into Fukushima. I talked about the amazing power of your mind. I talked about the South Carolina shooting, the Confederate flag, and all of that. Some bit of the history of the Civil War, but trust me, that was just a brief skimming over. There's way more out there for you to learn. Please go do your research, ladies and gentlemen. Don't ever take what I tell you to be gospel. I challenge you all to do the research yourself. That is how you will empower yourselves. So please go do it. Anyway, I want to get into Fukushima. So, Fukushima. I know nobody likes to talk about this. Fuku what, Popeye? I gotta get Christina back on. I gotta see when I can have her back on and pick her brain. I gotta get Dr. Loren Murray on and pick her brain. I'm gonna be working on all of this in the next few weeks. I have a very hectic, busy few weeks coming up, but nonetheless, I will be putting out some good stuff for you guys with a lot more focus on radiation updates and stuff. I know I've been talking to Christina about her coming on in the future a little bit more frequently. to do some more updates on not only Fukushima, but radiation, different ways we can mitigate it. Her research, she's done an extensive amount of research into airline anomalies and the effect that radiation has on metal structure and that itself, and then in relation to some of these airline anomalies or accidents that are happening. The infrastructure of the country, how that's affected. She's done a ton of research on they did this work back in the 50s. She just went and dug up all the work that's been sitting, collecting dust for 50, 60 years. But the government did all these tests and studies when they were doing all these bomb tests out in the middle of the desert and blowing up islands and everything else they were doing in the Pacific, creating Godzilla, so to speak. Anyway, Fukushima. And Fukushima is not the end all. That's not the only one that's a problem. There was Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, all the bombing, all the DU. Fukushima itself should make us look at radiation and the way we play with it. What did Einstein say? It's a hell of a way to boil water to make electricity by using nuke power. Anyway, the reason I bring Fukushima up tonight is there was something that caught my attention today. And I grilled Christina about it for a while today. And by the way, thank you, dear, for constantly putting up with me, picking your brain. I do appreciate it. I love you. So thank you for tolerating me. I constantly dig into her brain lately for radiation research and Fukushima information. And she is always there to answer my questions. So thank you to another amazing friend of mine. That's right, Rad Chick. Go check her out, by the way. I want to give her and Miss Milky a shout out before I get too into the Fukushima stuff, because I'm going to play a clip that Christina and I did on a broadcast back in March, and I'm going to play the news of what spurred this. I mentioned this earlier. But before I do that, I want you to go to Twitter and go check out Miss Milky the Clown or Radchick Forecast. That's Radchick, RADCHICK, the number 4, and then cast. You can find her at Twitter. And they're both over on YouTube, and I suggest you subscribe to both YouTube channels. Miss Milky puts out a ton of Fukushima updates. She focuses on it, and she's constantly searching the news to find these little 2-minute or even 30-second tidbits that they sneak out, and then they fill with other retarded fluff that they don't want you to really pay attention to. So they stick it in the middle. Nobody's really paying attention to it because half the country really doesn't actually care about Kim Kardashian. So what better place to hide something, right? So go check out Miss Milky's YouTube channel, which is Miss Milky the Clown and the number 1. And then Christina's channel is simply Rad Space Chick. So just look up Rad Chick. Rad as in radiation. Although Christina is radical, and I mean radical in the 1980 sense, where word, riding a skateboard. I know. Now I'm aging myself. Anyway, go check them both out on YouTube, ladies and gentlemen. So, Fukushima, what spurred my attention on this today? What made me think? Okay. I was actually on Miss Milky's YouTube channel. Again, Miss Milky the Clown and the number 1. And I was chilling on her channel. And she does these random updates. And the first beginning of the newest update she put out about Fukushima was from out on California, one of the local news stations out there. I think it's the NBC affiliate out there. And they're talking about what's going on with the seals and this toxic algae bloom. And I watched this 2-minute clip, and immediately I was like, oh my God, this is what Christina and I talked about back in March. I made a comment about Godzilla bacteria, or something to that effect. And I'll get into it a little bit more and what I think. But first, let me play the clip. Just because I've set it up, I want to play the audio clip for you. Now, remember, the news clip I'm going to play first, this is from now. This isn't from 3-4 months ago. This is from now. This is what Christina and I were talking about back then. And by the way, we're not the only ones. She's been screaming this for 4 years, by the way. So credit to her for being on point and having the same message. And look, sometimes when you wait and you have a little bit of patience, you will see what people have been warning about. As I said to her, I think a lot of people expected to see horns and stuff growing out of people's foreheads and people growing third arms or a third eye because of the radiation. And when that meme didn't play out, or people weren't dropping dead immediately, and they weren't seeing a lot of these immediate effects, I think that their opinion on the severity of the Fukushima situation might have been swayed a little bit. But 4 years later, and everything Christina talked about and has talked about for the past 4 years, especially with the Pacific Ocean and all these other amazing, great researchers, her fellow researchers and authors over at Climate Viewer, all these different people have put out a ton of work saying this, and now you're seeing it, and you're seeing the most asinine excuses being put out there. And nobody will just say, well, maybe it's the radiation. It's like this thing that nobody can touch. It's the third rail in the subway system that if you touch, you die. You say Fukushima radiation and you're done. It's amazing. Anyway, here's the clip from the KT5 or K5, whatever the hell it is, news out in the NBC News out in Cali. Listen to this.
Washington scientists are conducting an emergency survey of...
Oh, that's what it is, Washington. So it's not Cali, it's Washington State, still on the West Coast.
An unprecedented toxic algae bloom in the Pacific. The bloom is so big, it extends from Southern California to Alaska. In this video that may be difficult to watch, King 5's Allison Morrow shows us how it's affecting marine life in ways never seen before.
The untrained eye might wonder what's wrong with this sea lion. The video was taken a few weeks ago near Long Beach.
A sea lion with his head arched back and bobbing. He's basically having seizures.
Vera Trainer knows the reason for the seizures. It's in their lab refrigerator at NOAA's Northwest Fisheries Science Center.
There's long chains of different species in here.
They're most concerned about that white one.
This guy here.
It's an algae called Pseudonychia.
Each one of these are individual cells and they're joined.
Each cell is microscopic, but with millions together on Washington's coast, they're massively destructive.
So we're seeing effects on the marine ecosystem that we haven't seen before.
The bloom is unprecedented in size, though invisible. It produces a toxin called domoic acid. It's already closed crab and razor clam fisheries. And now its effects are spreading to mammals.
And here's my question. When they said though invisible, are they talking about the toxin that it produces? Or are they talking about the algae bloom itself? Because as Christina pointed out to me earlier today, she has yet to see pictures of the algae bloom. And I haven't seen any in any research that I've been able to find. And I'm not talking about like a satellite image of perhaps this could be an algae bloom or not because of certain levels of something in the water. No. I'm talking about, I have not, usually with algae blooms, especially something that big causing a problem, you'd have like red tide, you'd have green discoloration in the water. And you Google algae blooms, and you can see them from space, some of them. They're so bright. So where is the algae bloom? So that's my first question. Where's the algae bloom? If it is invisible, that begs another question, but if it is invisible and it creates this invisible poison, this acid, well what would make the algae bloom invisible? So that's why I'm asking what they're referring to as being invisible. Is it the algae bloom? Because I would say that if it is, invisibility would be a mutation of some sort. And what causes mutations? Radioactivity. And what's in all the water in the Pacific Ocean right now from Fukushima? Radioactivity. So, 1 + 1 = 2, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just saying. So I don't know if they're referring to the algae bloom being invisible, or if they're saying what's invisible is the toxin that it gives off. But if that's the case, if it's just the toxin that's invisible, where's the algae bloom? They showed this picture of the coast and it looks like clear water. So where's the algae bloom? Maybe it's not the algae bloom at all. I'll get into that in a second. Anyway, let me finish there's about 45 seconds left.
I think it's scary. When we start seeing marine mammals suffering from these toxins, they're not that far in the food chain from us.
NOAA's fisheries scientists have deployed to study it. They're on a ship looking for where the toxic cells are, just how toxic, and what's feeding their growth. With the information, they suspect they may not be able to stop the algae altogether.
But we're able to figure out how to live with them.
Tests of this sea lion showed high levels of domoic acid. It's the first recorded in Washington to react like this. And researchers know it won't be the last.
This is just one animal that was found on the beach. You wonder what other animals that are not on the beaches, what's happening to them.
In Seattle, Allison Morrow, King 5 News.
We'll never get rid of the algae. We'll just have to learn to live with it? What? Why would you have to learn to live with algae? Oh, maybe because it's not algae and it's radiation, and you have to learn to live with the radiation effects? Oh. Or, if it is algae, like I said to Christina earlier, if it's really algae, let's say for the sake of argument, it really is some weird mutated algae. That's freaky enough in and of itself. Even if it's not the radiation and just blaming algae. Let's say that really is some weird, toxic, mutated algae. Does that not bother anyone that there's this weird, toxic, mutated algae? All that life that's in that water, that seawater is teeming with microscopic life. If the radiation didn't kill it by now, it means it's adapted to it. Because it's mutated. What did it turn into? Did it turn into Godzilla bacteria, ladies and gentlemen? Now, speaking of Godzilla bacteria, as a segue to this clip that I want to play, Christina was an extremely busy woman today. She was not able to mount up her headset and ride shotgun with me tonight for this segment to talk about this, but she will be coming on in the future. Do not worry. I already spoke to her about it, but she told me to. She did reference, she said, may I remind you, the clips on my YouTube channel, and she was 1,000% correct. And she cut out this it's very synchronistic that this part of our interview was cut out already. And she had pointed this out months ago. Again, just backing up that she's been on point. So this is a clip from our interview from March talking about this very issue. Let's listen. And this is where I mentioned Godzilla bacteria.
And, even some of the experts have said, or people who are interviewed by the news, that, well, the Pacific is a big place and it dilutes and, there's all kinds of reasons not to worry about it, when the fact is, we have 3 uncontained meltdowns going on over there, and this has been going on 24 hours a day. And we're starting to see some of the effects of that, and even people who understood a lot about nuclear energy, who have studied nuclear accidents in the past, who know a lot about how radiation affects health from not only the previous accidents, but things that we've done on purpose, like atmospheric testing during the 50s and 60s and 70s, all the way up to, I think it was 93 was when they did the last one. We know what this does to plankton, to pretty much every stage of the food chain, but we've never had an accident like this one. And now there's some, real indications that this has already reached the West Coast in a big way. And what I mean by that is the California sea lion situation that's going on right now. And this is big news, which I've seen attributed to everything from, El Nino got here early and the ocean's too cold, and no, it's actually too warm, and that's what's killing all these seals. The rescues in California are expecting 35,000 baby seals to be affected by whatever's happening in the seal world just in over the next few months. And it's worse than it was last year. Last year was worse than the year before, and this first started happening in 2011 with the Alaskan seals, and then it happened in polar bears, and then it happened in walruses, and that was all just the first summer. And, he had seals washing up with, red puffy eyes, and they're bleeding out of, their ears, and their fins are burned, and they're losing hair and lesions. And then, when they analyzed these seals, they found out they were full of tumors. And the reason that we know about that, a lot of it is from the indigenous people that live in that area and actually hunt the seals, and had made these observations. And now it's moved down the coast kind of the way the currents do. And we're seeing it as far south as San Diego this year. And it's really, really bad. And it has a lot of people very, very upset, which they should have been really a long time ago when this first started happening. And there's been a gentleman on YouTube who has been saying from the beginning of this, he goes by the name Nibiru Magic, you can't stop the truth from leaking out of Fukushima. And unfortunately, it takes, these giant mortality events for people to get a clue maybe there is something going on. We've seen the starfish melting and the sardines have disappeared. And they've, this week, I think it was, they called it bazillions of crab-like things that had washed ashore that had never been seen before. Dead creatures covering the sand with a sea of red on California beaches. The orcas, their babies aren't surviving. I don't think there was even a single calf that survived this year, and they pay very close attention to the orcas. So, the government and their various, NOAA has been following this, and they've released some information on it. They said they did find radiation in the seals in 2011, but they didn't think it was enough that it would cause these kind of changes. That was what the line that they were adhering to. And you go back and you just look at this cover-up that's going on, and it's going up kind of in every aspect of, the fishing industry. They're trying to protect the tourism industry, the seafood industry. There's a lot of money to be lost by news of this nature. So there's a very concerted effort to hide what's really happening. And Woods Hole, which is an oceanographic institute that has done plenty of studies, and they receive all kinds of funding from the Department of Defense and a bunch of other, like 10 different government agencies. They have taken over, and they said they've taken it upon themselves to do seawater testing, and they enlist people who live along the West Coast to send them samples of seawater and $500 for them to test the seawater. And it's actually the plankton that we need to be testing, because the buildup of radiation occurs thousands of times higher in plankton than it does in surrounding seawater. So if you want to get, the absolute lowest contamination level possible, you test the seawater, which is what they're doing when what they actually need to be doing is testing the plankton.
And preparing to talk to you today, I went and started checking out just the latest Fukushima news, not stuff from, months ago. I mean, I was looking at the articles and stuff that you sent, but I just decided to go look today from the past few days just to see what was out there. Because it's amazing that even though there is stuff being put out about Fukushima, you just don't hear about it. Not even in the alternative media. It's like become taboo to talk about. It's almost like I think people are afraid to talk about it because nobody's grown a third arm out of the middle of their forehead yet, or a horn. So because there isn't some quick, oh my God, reaction to the radiation, like physiologically with the people there, besides all the cancers and stuff, a lot of that's being suppressed. So people are afraid of being called fearmongers now about Fukushima, I think. So they just don't talk about it. I think they don't understand it's one of these slow creeping things. And as each year passes, you're going to see slowly mutations take place and more things. Like you said, all the sea lions. That's one of the things I wanted to bring up. How about the starfish? They're melting. And they're like, oh, it's bacteria. Really? I'm 38. I've never seen starfish melt. I know I've only been around 38 years, but I ain't never seen starfish melt into goo. Okay, you can't tell me that's some parasitic bacteria that just happened to come out of nowhere. And maybe it is. Maybe it is some weird parasite. What made it start to liquefy the starfish if it's never done that before? So there's a mutation of some sort. So either the starfish are mutating and melting and reacting to the radiation in the seawater, or the bacteria, quote unquote, that's eating them is reacting to the radiation and mutating and becoming like some sort of monster bacteria, which actually is even more frightening than the radiation melting the starfish. I would kind of expect the radiation to break down the body of the starfish, right? I've seen what my mother died of cancer. Actually, she died more so of the chemo that they gave her. But I've seen what radiation does to the human body. Saw it break her down. So I would almost expect, Christina, for the starfish to melt. But the thought that the bacteria or whatever it is, fungus or whatever it is they say that they got, the thought that could have been something that was completely normal that the starfish deal with, and usually their bodies could fight it off. But if this stuff was mutated by radiation, what if they created? It could be like the Godzilla of bacteria in the sea. That's kind of frightening.
Yeah, and we know that radiation already does this to bacteria and viruses, and that's been known like for a long time. And you say, "Wow, I've never heard of starfish melting before." The people who study starfish and have studied starfish their whole lives had never heard of it happening before either. And there's a couple of things that make the starfish situation unique. One is that starfish actually take in seawater and use it kind of like blood. Seawater is like circulating through their body. And the second thing is that they feed on like oysters and clams and things like that are filter feeders, things that don't move. They stay there, they filter the water, and they're very close to clay bottoms. And because of the electrical charge that's in radiation, it's attracted to clay. And also, it is found in much higher levels in things like oysters, in things like clams, because of this filtering process. And in fact, there was a document, a PDF that was released in 2011 where they had tested the Alaskan seashore, and they tested rockfish, and they tested all these different kinds of mussels and things like that, and they found contamination in all of those things, but it was much, much higher in things that were filter feeders. So this is directly what the starfish are feeding on. So you have this like dynamic going on in the food chain that would make them more susceptible to it.
I didn't know that they actually use the seawater like blood, but I mean that would make, I mean that they're just, it's like they're getting chemo. The starfish are getting seawater chemo. That's
right.
It's ridiculous.
I never thought about it that way, but yeah, that's kind of what it's like.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Starfish getting saltwater chemo. But I'm sure that has nothing to do with the starfish melting. I'm sure that has nothing to do with the mutant algae bacteria. I mean, everything that we talked about in that little 10-minute segment right there is going on right now. I'm not kidding. I mean, you heard the news clip I played first, and then you heard the interview that we did in March. It's June 23rd. We did the interview on March 28th, so almost 3 months ago. So Fukushima is an ongoing problem. We need to pay attention, ladies and gentlemen. We need to do something about it. First, research. Educate yourself, because the government ain't going to do it for you. And unfortunately, neither is a large section of the alternative media. Except for Miss Milky, Climate Viewer News, Any News, Rad Chick. Go check them out. Stay tuned, 3 minutes. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Final segment, tonight's live edition. Wow. Night went by fast tonight. Extremely fast. I don't even know where to start in the final segment. You know what? First, I'll start with the two articles that Christina sent me. Well, one's an article, and the other one's something I actually want to read, which I was going to get into. But first, let me throw the links out. That's where I'll start, and then I'll get into the article, and then I'll read the. It's from a WordPress website, but it's called Paul Langley's Nuclear History Blog. And yes, I say nuclear just like George W. Bush did. I also say radiator. Deal with it. So it's a Jersey in me. But she sent me this link. The bioaccumulation of contamination in plankton from the U.S. Armed Forces going back to 1955. So I'm going to read you that in a second. But first I want to throw these links out. That's where I'll start. And then we will get into that other little tidbit that I just gave you because I want to spend a few minutes on that. We're going to spend the rest of the half hour here talking about Fukushima and radiation. And not just radiation, but like the fact that they've known about this. And that obviously they're not going to tell you, and you need to educate yourself on how to mitigate the effects of this, how to live healthier, where not to live right now, or at least where not to source your food from if you don't live there. Anyway, there's a lot of implications and a lot of things you have to think about. So the first article is from Any News, ENE News, Energy News. The title is Emergency Survey Underway Along West Coast. Marine Life Being Affected in Ways Never Seen Before. And then it's got a little bit longer of a title, but just if you go to Any News, enenews.com, it's right there on the website. You can't miss it. Go find it. They talk about Fukushima. You should go to that website anyway for news, ladies and gentlemen. They have a ton of information. You don't have to agree with everything they say, but you can at least pay attention and see what's being said because they're really the only people that are talking about Fukushima and radiation. So, anyway, I'm going to drop the link into, go to the chat room here, True Frequency. There you go. My fingers smashing the enter button again because I don't know how to hit enter lightly. Mr. Heavy Hands. Anyway, a little humor, ladies and gentlemen. I try to interject a little bit of laughter and humor while talking about Fukushima or other such dark things. Kind of lightens it up a little bit. So there's the link. It's in the chat room. Any News, emergency survey underway along the West Coast. And it goes into everything that I talked about with Christina, everything that you heard in that clip. And there's links and stuff in there. It's a good article. So thank you to Christina for sending me that. And then the second thing I want to get into now is this paper that came out. This report. That's, again, I'm going to drop the link for this too in the chat. It's titled The Bioaccumulation of Contamination in Plankton. And it's from the U.S. Armed Forces going back to when? 1955. Let me repeat that one more time for you. 1955. One more time. 1955. When is it now? 2015? 19. Say it with me. 60 years ago. 2005 would have been 50 years. 2015 is 60 years ago this report came out. So there is no, we didn't know. Oh, duh. We can claim ignorance. Really? Because I didn't know that they knew. Christina's the one that told me. That's why she dropped me that link. We had discussed this earlier today. I had no clue. I thought that they had never tested it. And I was like, well, maybe if they tested it. And she was like, they did 60 years ago. And I was quite surprised. And I was like, what do you mean they tested it? She was like, hold on, I'll find you the link. I'll find you the little tidbit. She gave it to me and I read it. And I went, what? They actually did know. I mean, I'm not saying that it surprises me that I guess it kind of did surprise me because all this time I had actually thought they just didn't test and they didn't care. I think it's actually worse that they knew and they just don't care. I mean, just blowing it off and acting. And I always said that they knew. And I know they had done some testing, but I didn't realize the extensive testing that they had done and the lengths that they actually went and the things that they tested. They've tested metal. They know the effects of radiation. There's all these different scientists, even if they weren't government funded, that have tested the effects of radiation on numerous things. And yet you never hear that even being mentioned today at all. And I'm not just talking about the mainstream, the alternative too, because I think people are really afraid of being called a fearmonger when it comes to Fukushima, because again, you don't see people growing a horn or a third arm or a third eye yet. But the cancer rates are going up. What about the spike in infant mortality around the time of the Fukushima disaster along the West Coast? mean, there's a lot of things that happened. How come they turned off the radiation detectors on the West Coast and in Canada? Riddle me this, riddle me that, Batman. Anyway, I want to go, before I get too sidetracked and ranting about this, I want to read this to you. The bioaccumulation of contamination in plankton, U.S. Armed Forces, 1955. I think I dropped it in the chat room, but let me just drop it again in here just to see if I did. And yeah, I did already, because the chat room only lets you drop stuff in once, so you can't spam it. Okay, so the link is in there. I will make sure that I link this specifically in the show description. When I put it on YouTube, I'll put this in the link, and when I put it on Federal Jack, I'll put it in the link. Again, just Google, I hate, belay my last, search engine. See, I'm still trying to remove that word from my lexicon. Just taking a little bit. Anyway, look up the bioaccumulation of contamination in plankton. U.S. Armed Forces, 1955. If you put that in the search engine, it should pop this page up. Again, the bioaccumulation of contamination in plankton, U.S. Armed Forces, 1955. Here we go. Evaluation of radioactive fallout. Armed Forces Special Weapons Project, Washington, D.C. And I'm reading you what's on the front here so you understand. So you'd realize that they knew what was up. Notice, this is an extract of, and it gives the full report number, which is Alpha, Foxtrot, Sierra, Washington, Papa, or Whiskey. Wow. It's been a while since I had to recite the phonetic alphabet. Hold on. Let me do that again properly. Alpha, Foxtrot, Sierra, Whiskey, Papa, dash 97. I'm not sure if that's an 8 or Bravo. Anyway, evaluation of radioactive fallout. That's the title of it, which remains classified secret restricted data as of this date. Dun, dun, dun. There's the problem. Secret restricted data. See, all they have to do is label it secret, top secret, classified, whatever, and then off it goes. And you don't need to know that, John Q. Public, because you're not smart enough. You can't handle this. Extract version prepared for the Director of Defense Nuclear Agency, Washington, D.C., 15 May 1981. So, they obviously, for whatever reason, this little extract here was made available for the director of the Defense Nuclear Agency back in the 80s, and they went and cited this report that was done 30 years before in the 50s. And then the guy who put the WordPress site together, he did an awesome job, actually, because he went through the thing and he found, and he cites where you can see it in the report, and he gives a link to the whole thing. So you can check out the full thing, the full report itself. But he gives he gives the page number, and he cuts out the sections that you need to pay attention to instead of forcing the reader to go do the research initially, which you should still do, because that's why he gives you the link and he tells you where to find it, because it's still prodding you to go to do it. But he does a good job of presenting it to make you want to research further. Anyway, quote off page 59. The problem of radioactive particles falling into the ocean raises the question of their availability to this portion of the biosphere. Plankton normally found in seawater are consumed in large quantities by fish. So they knew back in the 50s that the fallout from blowing things up out in the ocean and even out over the desert, if it got into when it gets up into the air and gets carried out over the ocean, they knew that that the sea life are going to be eating this and exposed to this. So they knew back in the 50s. So what the hell's the difference between that and Fukushima? Why shouldn't I be concerned? I'm not fear-mongering. I'm not running around trying to sell you potassium iodide. I'm not trying to scare the crap out of you. Run! Run! Look, it's happening. You can't run. We're all affected by it. As soon as you realize that, you have to just accept that reality, and now we have to deal with it. That's the way it is. There's no fear needed in this, but we do have to pay attention to it. I mean, if you're standing on the tracks and the train is coming, do you say, well, you're just a fear monger because you're saying that huge light is a train? No, it's really a train. Like, we could either get off the tracks, and if we're stuck on the tracks, we can figure out how to, mitigate the problem. How to maybe we'll have to lose our shoes, leave the shoes on the tracks. You have to cut yourself free. Maybe the shoe's stuck, so you're gonna have to walk home in your socks or barefoot. But new shoes versus being dead, right? So you cut yourself free of the laces because the shoes are stuck on the railroad tie or whatever, and you get out. Yeah, you lost your shoes. You took some damage, but you were able to mitigate it. Now, I know that's kind of a rough example compared to being bathed in radiation, but you get my drift. You understand. Knowing that the problem exists is the first step to solving it, ladies and gentlemen. They know that. Anyway, back to the report. These plankton concentrate mineral elements from the water, and it has been found that radioactivity may be concentrated in this manner by as much as 1,000-fold. Thus, for example, 1 gram of plankton could contain 1,000 times as much radioactivity as a gram of water adjacent to it. The radioactivity from these plankton, which form a portion of fish diet, tends to concentrate in the liver of the fish, and if sufficiently high levels of contamination are encountered, could have a marked effect upon the ecology of an ocean area. I'm going to read that again because that is astoundingly powerful. Now, let me tell you, and this is from page 59 and 60 in the report, I am reading this portion to you, okay, live, on air, for the first time. So this is my actual initial reaction. Because Christina had told me about this, but I never got a chance to actually read it over until she had sent it to me during the break. You're hearing my initial reaction. And I'm telling you right now, that's profoundly powerful. Did you hear what they just said? Hold on. Let me rewind for you one more time. Let me reread that for you. Okay? I'm going to read the full thing from the very top. So starting at page 59 and going on to 60 is this section of the report. The problem of radioactive particles falling into the ocean raises the question of their availability to this portion of the biosphere. Plankton normally found in seawater are consumed in large quantities by fish. These plankton concentrate mineral elements from the water, and it has been found that radioactivity may be concentrated in this manner by as much as 1,000-fold. Thus, for example, 1 gram of plankton could contain 1,000 times as much radioactivity as a gram of water adjacent to it. The radioactivity from these plankton, which form a portion of fish diet, tends to concentrate in the liver of the fish, and, if sufficiently high levels of contamination are encountered, could have a marked effect upon the ecology of an ocean area, i.e., the Pacific getting bombarded by the fallout from Fukushima. Whether or not you believe the explosion you saw, some people, I know that I've heard people when they try to debunk Fukushima researchers, again, the misuse of the word debunk. There has to be things filled with crap in order to be debunked. Anyway, the people that there's two, I guess, trains of thought in this, that it was a hydrogen explosion which thrust these fuel rods, pretty much blew them apart and atomized them and threw them up into the atmosphere in very small particles. And then I've heard some people say that there was a nuke explosion there. I don't think that was a nuke explosion. I think it was probably, it might have been a hydrogen explosion up underneath where those fuel rods were kept, but that's all you need to do. I mean, they're radioactive. You blow them up and turn them into dust and put them in the atmosphere. Well, there you go. You now have fallout. You now have radioactive particulate all over the place. And that wasn't the only part of Fukushima. See, everybody, when they try to quote-unquote debunk Fukushima researchers, they'll say, Oh, well, they'll focus on the explosion, and then they'll say, oh, but, that's been debunked, blah, 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 that wasn't this, that wasn't that. They don't focus that the explosion atomized all that stuff. It made it very tiny and blew it out in the atmosphere. And that's not the only thing where the radiation is coming from. What about all the radioactive seawater that is to this day, the radioactive water, I should say, it's being dumped into the sea? And they did have to use, I think, seawater at one point, but then the salt was causing a lot of problems. But there's still any water that they use, they're dumping it clear back into the ocean. They admit it. They've had leaks. What about by now the core is melted and it's down into the ground, so that's contaminating any water that passes through the ground and goes out that way into the ocean. They know that this radiation's getting into the ocean. They know. They know. They know. They know. But they tell you that the solution to pollution is dilution. The solution to pollution is not dilution, especially not when it comes to radioactive material, ladies and gentlemen. Period. It's that simple. The Pacific Ocean is being irradiated. And I'm not being a fearmonger when I tell you this. I want you to know this so we can take action. We can try to mitigate the damage that's being done by going, la, 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 there's no problem. Fuka, what? La, 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 la. That's a huge problem. That's a huge problem because no one's addressing it. See, if everybody focused that this was a huge, real problem, imagine if the international community, we love that the international community gets together and gets on countries' asses about certain things, right? Sometimes people don't like it. Sometimes people do like it. Well, what if the international community got on Japan's ass and said, yo, if you can't handle this, we're going to come in and handle it because you're going to kill all of us. See, that's a real worldwide problem that we could all focus on. But no, we don't. We don't. And you could get off into conspiracies and different trains of thought as to why. I'm not going to get into that tonight. The point is, I bring it up because we need to focus on it. We, the people, need to make them, the idiots in charge of things currently, focus on it. If we gave half a crap about Fukushima and the effects of the radiation in the seawater and to all the sea life, not to mention the fallout, the food. How about the fire that was over in Chernobyl? Chernobyl happened, 20 years ago? Was it 20, 30 years ago? There was a fire a couple months back. Christina and I reported on that from the road a little bit. And they admitted that there was fallout from that because the radiation that was in the ground got picked up, moved around, resuspended in the atmosphere. And some of it was going to come over here. A lot of people were talking about that. That was 20, 30 years ago, and that's still causing problems. This thing's going on today. This will profoundly not only affect you, ladies and gentlemen, but your children and your grandchildren and their children. If you don't care about yourself, that's fine. But you should care about your children and your grandchildren. If you don't have kids, care about your nieces or your nephews. We're just your fellow humans. And perhaps Japan will be the ones that are the most highly affected, and then the West Coast and anybody around the Pacific region there. If you're in Australia, I'd be careful. Indonesia, anywhere around there. Korea, of any, North Korea, South Korea, although I doubt you're listening to this broadcast if you're in North Korea. I would start to pay attention. Try to grow your own food if you can. Filter your water to the best degree that you can. But even if you could filter radioactive particulate out of water, the problem remains that the filter material would still have the radiation in it, and then you'd have to dispose of the radioactive filter somewhere. Honestly, the only real good way to do it, another conversation Christina and I had about this, with any of this radioactive waste and material, is to shoot it into the sun. The sun sends radioactivity our way anyway in the light rays, so It's about the only place that you could put this stuff where it wouldn't cause any harm, because the sun is a big ball of radioactive fire. But mankind can't get satellites into the sky without blowing them into a bazillion pieces. Credit to Christina for bringing this up when I said, you got to wonder why they haven't shot the stuff into the sun or thought about it. And she's like, yeah, unless they can use a railgun or a huge slingshot or something, I doubt you want them to send that stuff up on a rocket engine. And I was like, point to you. 1,000% correct on her part. They can't get an MTV satellite into outer space without blowing it into a bazillion pieces. I certainly don't want them taking like 200 or 300 pounds of cesium and plutonium and all this other crap and throwing it out in the atmosphere and poof. Yeah, that's not good. Yeah, not cool. So, she's right. Not a good idea to let them send it up in rockets. But I'm going to tell you what, we need to do something. We need to figure out a better way. As Einstein said, it's a hell of a way to boil water, ladies and gentlemen. It really is. We really need to come up with a better way. I mean, this is just insane. I don't like nuke plants. If I knew that these people were actually doing safety checks and they were actually doing the right thing and handling their business and things weren't being done on the cheap, and things weren't done the way they actually are done, then maybe, and there wasn't a chance of all this devastation and everything, then maybe nuke plants would be a good idea. But unfortunately, the reality is they're not. They're not. They're not. And I'm not an activist. I'm not a member of Greenpeace. I'm a common sense using individual, ladies and gentlemen. There have to be better ways, and there are, to harness energy for our needs. I'm not saying we have to go back and live in the Stone Age, but there has to be a better way to do things. Maybe we could live a little bit more efficiently. I'm not saying we have to do Agenda 21 type stuff, but maybe we don't have to leave the lights on in the room all day if we're not in it. How about just conserve like a normal person? A little bit of common sense. Let's not be wasteful. We don't need to use that. If we're not using the electricity, do you need to leave the TV and the lights on in a room if you're not going to be in it for 45 minutes? Well, but I'll be back in it later. So you need it prepped for you? What are you, King Farouk? You can't turn everything back on? It's just simple common sense thinking like that. You could cut down the electricity usage. And on days where, like in Florida, it's been really hot the past couple of days, so the electricity usage has gone through the roof in certain parts of the state for all the ACs. Well, why not use more solar or hydrothermal, the water? Why not invest into that stuff? Why are we using nuke power plants? I'm not just rallying against big oil. I'm saying all the ways we do things that poison the planet and cause chaos and mayhem, we need to stop and maybe rethink. How about that? Shift in our perspective, ladies and gentlemen, actually being the change, right? Nuke power plants, no bueno. No bueno. No good. No good. Anyway, I don't want to go off on a rant. We've got about a minute and a half left. I'm going to give Radchick and Miss Milky another shout out. Make sure you follow them both on Twitter and on YouTube. At Miss Milky the Clown. I think it's Miss Milky's Twitter. Let me double check. I want to make sure I give you the right one. I know Christina's is Radchick, the number 4, and then cast. So Radchick 4 cast. Miss Milky's is at Miss Milky the Clown. Follow them both and then look them up both on YouTube. Miss Milky is Miss Milky the Clown and the number 1. And Christina is Rad, R-A-D, space, chick. Follow them both. Educate yourself about Fukushima, ladies and gentlemen. Don't be afraid. We'll get through this as we always do, but you need some common sense and some logic and some love to do so. We'll be all right.
This is Sparta!
With that, I am out of time. I'll see you all again Thursday. Until then, remember, as I always tell you, the solutions to our problems are an inside job. So go out and be the superheroes. I know you all are, ladies and gentlemen. I love you all, and I believe in every single one of you. I am out of here.